There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. Please be seated. Honorable members, we wish to remind you to keep in your seat with your mask on all the time for the safety of all of us in the House. I wish to inform the House that the Speaker has received a letter dated 14 May 2021 from the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture in order to inform members about the correction of the amount spent on building of the State Steve Biko Heritage Complex in Ginsberg. As stated in his closing remarks on the 13th of May 2021 during the mini plenary session on the budget vote 37, the minister wishes to correct his statement that the department spent 608 million rand in building the Steve Biko Heritage Complex in Ginsberg. The correct amount is 106 million and not, in other words, 608. This letter has also been published in the ATC, if you want to verify it, of the 25th May 2021. Thank you very much. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. On behalf of the Chief Whip,
Deputy Speaker, I move on behalf of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party that the House knows that with sadness the passing of Ms Jacqueline Mofokeng, African National Congress MP, who died of COVID-19 complications on Thursday, 22 April 2021, acknowledges that Ms Mofokeng's political leadership roles began in the early 90s when she was elected to serve in various ANC structures of Gauteng, from Branch Executive Committee to Greater Swana Region, and Provincial Executive Committee, as well as the Women's League and the South African National Civic Organization in Gauteng. Further acknowledges that at the time of her passing, she was serving as the Women's League Gauteng Provincial Spokesperson, a task she did with dedication and commitment. Recalls that she became a member of Gauteng Provincial Legislature from 1999 to 2019, serving in the portfolio committees on local government, social development and education. Further recalls that she also served in Gauteng Provincial Legislature as the chairperson of the Oversight Committee on the Premier's Office and the Legislature, the chairperson of Community Safety Portfolio Committee, the Deputy Chief Whip of the Legislature, and the chairperson of the Standing Committee for the Scrutiny of Subordinate Legislation. Remembers that Jacqueline became a member of the 6th Democratic Parliament in 2019 and served as in the Constitutional Review Committee, the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence, the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, the Portfolio Committee on Police. Further remembers that she took over as the whip of the study group on Justice and Correctional Services following the passing on of the late Advocate Hisham Mohammed in 2020. Understands that she also served and led with the structures of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and Commonwealth Women's Parliamentarians, and conveys sincere condolences to the Mafokeng family and her loved ones and the ANC. I thank you.
thank you. Honorable W. Hon.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. We rise on behalf of the Democratic Alliance to support the motion of remembrance and condolences for the late Honourable Jacqueline Mofokeng, or Jackie, as we all got to know her. From the moment we met after the 2019 election at the very first meeting of the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services, she always impressed as a dedicated and hard-working member. Words like well-prepared, diligent attendee, and a positive contributor can be used without any embellishment to describe her contributions in this committee. Now, Chair and Deputy Speaker, in the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services, she was, as far as it is our experience as the opposition concerned, part of a cohort of members in the ANC who had done much more in the sixth parliament than just paying lip service to their oversight duties. While she did not shy away from robust engagement with the executive departments and entities which appeared before the Portfolio Committee, she also did not forego any opportunity to score a point or two against political opponents. She was, after all, a seasoned politician, and she will be fondly remembered for this ability as well. Deputy Speaker, it's particularly sad that her term was ended by this cruel virus, now that the Portfolio Committee is on the verge of completing the 3 bills that will hopefully, once it becomes law, enable the justice system a bit better to deliver justice to victims of domestic violence, sexual crimes, and other gender-based violent crimes. A passion about the matters addressed by these bills will ultimately be the way we will remember her. It's our privilege to say that we express our condolences to her family, her party, and her caucus. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Yako.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. The EFF also wishes to support this motion of wishing condolences to the family of the late Honorable Jacqueline Mofokeng. Not only was her passing sudden and shocking, it left a gaping hole, a shoe that cannot be filled, in the role she played in the space of governance, Parliament in particular, more specifically, the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services. It was even more saddening for myself personally to learn that her daughter, who is exactly the same age as me, had passed just the day before from the same virus. It just validated that this deadly virus has no face, it has no age, it does not discriminate in its rampage, that a cure must be found, and that South Africans are in desperate need for the vaccine to be available to all, and that the vaccine must be available immediately. At the time the committee was discussing, I met the Honorable Mafokeng late last year when I joined the Portfolio Committee she served in. At the time, the committee was discussing the sexual crimes and gender-based violence bills. I was apprehensive at first to add my voice in such an important matter. However, I found mature camaraderie, a fearlessness, and a no-holds-barred approach by my fellow female colleagues who served with me towards these bills. The agenda across the board was to see justice served by those perpetrators of gender-based violence, rape, and all kinds of violence against women and children, to see the survivors of gender-based violence and all sexual crimes receive the justice they deserve. It was and is still important to all of us that our judiciary and the police department take their role with regards to these crimes with the seriousness they deserve. It was refreshing to witness older women who are not touched by ageism or political dwarfism, but have respect and support for the opinion of the opposition. To learn that that woman in green and black, whose appearance was constant in River Steenkamp's murder trial, not only warms my heart, but it pains me in that she never got to see these bills passed. The Honorable Mofokeng was not only vocal and clear on her standpoint on various issues, which were at times contentious, but she was also no wallflower. She was someone I came to admire, a kind and beautiful woman who exuded a quiet strength and a high level of commitment to her duties, as not only a member of Parliament, but also a servant of the people. May her soul rest in peace, may her family find healing, and may her comrades carry on from where she left off. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
You, Honorable Msimang. IFP.
Honorable Chairperson.
Is muted.
Honorable Simang, you are muted.
Thank you for your assistance, Chief Whip. Is he still muted? Honorable Msimang.
Chairperson, can I proceed?
Yes, yes, yes. It's still the Deputy Speaker. Go ahead, then.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, because I've been caught off guard here. I had to even put a jacket on. Deputy Speaker, the IFP would like to convey our deepest condolences on the passing of Honorable Ms J M Mofokeng, who passed away on 22nd April this year. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family and loved ones, the ANC caucus in Parliament, and her former colleagues in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Speaking about the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Honorable Deputy Speaker, I remember she spoke very fondly of her relationship with our former Secretary General, Honorable Sibongile Nkomo, who also passed on, and may both their souls rest in peace. Honorable Ms Mafokeng worked, as we have heard, for over 20 years in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, and more recently was an active member in the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services, and a member of the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence. In these committees, I'm informed she diligently carried out her mandate, and the IFP would like to acknowledge the life and work of Honorable Ms Mofokeng. In fact, Honorable Deputy Speaker and colleagues, just 2 weeks before her passing, she chaired a meeting of the subcommittee on the political office bearers pension fund, and I had to present a report to her, and she was so kind and, you know, just that humble person, human being that she always was. The passing of Honorable Mafokeng is a reminder that public service must be guided by passion and dedication, and always with the goal to uplift the people of South Africa. The raging fight against the pandemic should not distract us from ensuring our work serves the people of South Africa. On behalf of our leader in Parliament, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and all the IFP members in the National Assembly, I would like to again extend our sincere condolences on this tragic loss. May her soul rest in eternal peace. I thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The untimely demise of a daughter and her mother, one day apart, as in the case of Thatu and her mother, late fellow Honorable Member Jacqueline Mofokeng, once again reminds us how fragile, precious and mortal life is, as well as a real threat of COVID-19 as an invisible common enemy. I served as a member with former Honorable Mafokeng in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature between 2004 and 2014, as well as in the Portfolio Committees for Community Safety and Infrastructure Development. She also interacted in several meetings with other Freedom Front Plus members present in this House today. During the 10 years, we had the privilege to spend time together on numerous provincial and interprovincial oversights and international study tours to Swaziland, Botswana, China, and Thailand, amongst others. It is during such visits that members from different political parties get to know each other in person. Late Honorable Mofokeng stood firm for what she believed in, and although we often viewed total opposite opinions on burning issues, we respected each other regardless. She always acted friendly to me and went out of her way to greet me here in Parliament after the 29 general election, as was the case last time I saw her. Freedom Front Plus, we should carry out our heartfelt condolences to the next of kin of late Honorable Mofokeng and her colleagues in the ANC. Pray for strength and peace. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Switch off your mic. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mulder. Honorable Steve Swart. Ndate Mare, please switch off your mic.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, it is with a profound and deep sense of sadness that I partake in this condolence motion. May I firstly, on behalf of the ACDP, express our deepest condolences to the family of the Honorable Jacqueline Mofokeng, who not only lost a wife and a mother, but also their daughter one day earlier. I had the pleasure of serving with the Honorable Mafokeng on the Justice Portfolio Committee, and she took over as the ANC whip of the study group after the passing of Advocate Hisham Mohammed. And these were indeed big shoes to fill, and she did so admirably. I have fond memories of the Honorable Mafokeng. She was a very hardworking, well-prepared member of parliament. And she always made a point of saying that she was a believer, and those sentiments were expressed in her work. And this should be a comfort to her family and her friends that she is with the Lord. She was indeed a true servant of the people. The contributions in the committee during the deliberations on various issues, and in particular on the gender-based violence laws, were invaluable. When I expressed concerns about the definition of spiritual abuse, which we dealt with today even, she welcomed my draft proposal defining the issue more in line with the Constitution. And she was always engaging in that regard to hear from other members from across the political divide. As other members indicated, we should dedicate the 3 gender-based violence bills to her when we pass them, hopefully next week. Life is short indeed, and death is a certainty, particularly at this time of COVID-19. Make sure that we spread love, forgiveness, and reconciliation wherever we go. Our nation is desperate for this. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Mafokeng family and their loved ones and members of the ANC at this time. May her soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the United Democratic Movement, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to the Mofokeng family, close friends, and the African National Congress on the passing of Honorable Jacqueline Mofokeng. Our thoughts and prayers are with you during this difficult time in all her roles and responsibilities, firstly in the provincial legislature in Gauteng and here in the National Assembly. Honorable Jackie Mofokeng has applied and served the nation with distinction and is one of those few leaders we consider to be a leader who was a leader of integrity. Ms Mofokeng understood that the legislature or the legislative arm of government should be used at all times to advance the transformation agenda by enacting progressive legislations that seek to improve the quality of lives of the people and to try and build a better life for all. She was a trailblazer for many ideas that are now common and are discussed on a daily basis. We'll forever miss her contribution and passion and commitment to gender equality, the empowerment of women, and the protection of rights of women and children, and that she always emphasized the struggle for national liberation was equally a struggle against sexism and gender oppression. Would like to say with these few words that would like umama to rest in peace. Alale ngoxolo, ugqatso lakho lufezile. Siyabulela. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable August.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, on behalf of Good Movement, I would like to extend our condolences on the passing of ANC MP Jacqueline Mofokeng. In a very moving statement, ANC Chief Whip stated that Ms Mofokeng died with her boots on. Honorable Deputy Speaker, considering such a heartwarming statement to honor the late MP, more so for South Africa to know the type of leadership and traits our colleague had, it is evident that the nation has lost a true daughter of our soil. Ms Mofokeng contributed greatly to the work of Parliament and was an avid listener to the views of others, even from opposition parties, as she recognized her responsibility to the important work of this House. Honorable Deputy Speaker, as we bid farewell to the committed colleague in the fight against gender-based violence, I ask that this House honors the memory of our fellow leader, that of her incredible work and her legacy, and extend our warmest sympathy to the family, friends, and colleagues Ms Mofokeng leaves behind. May her stellar example act as a mirror to us, and I ask that we each take a page out of her book of life to understand what it means to truly be a servant leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable August. Let's hear Honorable Sibisi.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The National Freedom Party was set in by the passing of Ms. Jacqueline Mofokeng. Sorry. We would like to express our deepest and heartfelt condolences to the Mofokeng family, friends, and her political family. South Africa will forever be indebted to the Mafokeng family for lending its daughter to make a contribution in the fight for the liberation of this country. We hope that her political home, the African National Congress, will honor her memory and her contribution to the liberation movement by putting our people first in all its endeavors. South Africa is grateful for her contribution to the liberation movement and mourns the loss of its daughter. May her soul continue to rest in peace. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable BC. Let's hear Honorable Jaisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. As AIC, we also convey our condolences to the family of Mafokeng on having lost their beloved one. That is Honorable Mafokeng. We appreciate the contribution that she has made to the country and the government in particular. Serving and working in so many portfolios was not an easy job, but she had to do it because she was very diligent. We say her friends and relatives and the ANC must also be comforted that she has done her work to the least. It is always hurting to lose women of her caliber. However, nothing could have been done because it was a call from above and she was supposed to respond. It bereaved the family of Mafokeng must be comforted to note that this is the way for us to go. We cannot escape. We shall keep on praying. We shall never give up until we defeat this pandemic that has come to rob us of our beloved ones. You should know that you are not alone. We have got to share your pain as we are sharing your pain. We say, may her soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Jaisa. Honorable Madisha.
Deputy Speaker. On behalf of Honorable Lokota and Hope, I rise to join all honorable members, pass Hope's sincere condolences, first to the family of the late Honorable Mofokeng. Without doubt, they have lost a family member they loved, they lost a mother and a wife. Our sincere condolences to the ANC, the party which represented both in this august house and before in the provincial legislature of Gauteng. Our condolences to SAMCO and the ANC Women's League. Without doubt, they too have lost because for them to give leadership positions was a clear indication of confidence in her, the confidence that she could and would lead. Although we are from different political parties, Hope believes that we are one because we share a common family, a family of South Africans who sent us here to manufacture laws and policies that must improve lives of all South Africans, ensure that they have jobs, they don't remain poor, their children access free quality education, and all South Africans remain safe. We may differ in our approach and tactics, but we are one. It's unfortunate that she has left too early, but then we shall join her and let her rest in peace. Thank you.
Honorable Hendrickson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the Al Jamaa Party, I express our sincere condolences to the family, friends, the ANC, and fellow members of Parliament on the death of Mrs. Jacqueline Mofokeng. We are also sad to note that Mrs. Mafokeng passed on the 22nd of April 2021, a day after her daughter, the beloved Tatu, died. Our deepest sympathies to all their loved ones. Ms. Mafokeng was a dedicated and hard worker who served on several committees of Parliament and the nation is indebted to her for her strong oversight. She will be remembered as a strong advocate for the liberation of women and protection of children, following in the footsteps of another champion of children's safety, former President Nelson Mandela. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Ms Mofokeng and her daughter, and also everyone during the sad time of bereavement. May their souls rest in peace, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hadebe.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, the members of this august house, the Mofokeng family at the gallery, Mangwane Limtswala, Amuhela mo kontlong ya National Assembly. Re thabile haholo hore le be le rona kajeno. Hobane kajeno re hopola ngwana wa lona, Comrade Jacqueline Mofokeng. On behalf of the African National Congress, I would like to appreciate each and every member who contributed in this condolence motion, because it shows that Comrade Jackie was working with the people who had conscience, the people who love one another. Because it's only through time like this, the trying times of death, that the people will show their true colors. The members of this National Assembly has done that today by honorable one of our own. But we, as the African National Congress, we say, we are deeply hurt by what has happened on the 22nd of April 2021. Because if you remember very well, that month is the month in which a lot of heroes from the side of the African National Congress passed on. I remember 1979, it was Comrade Solomon Mahlangu. 1993, it was Comrade Chris Hani. 1993, it was Comrade Oliver Tambo. So this month to us has come as a symbol in which the cadres of this movement has sacrificed their life for the greater good of this country. But to this house and in South Africa at large, we say that the ANC has groomed one of its best cadres in the form of Comrade Jackie, because Comrade Jackie fought a good fight, completed the race, and kept the faith. What is awaiting her is a crown of righteousness from the Lord. So why do we say if fought a good fight? It's very simple. It is very difficult to involve yourself in the liberation struggle, because there's one thing which, when you take that oath, that you become part of the liberation struggle during that time, the 80s, 70s, even up to the 90s, it was that during that time you were signing yourself for a prison sentence. You were signing yourself for death by Askaris. You were signing yourself for imprisonment. But what has happened is that Comrade Jackie was one of the few cadres who was able to raise her hand and say, I'm available to serve the people of this country. We, as the African National Congress, we say that she served us with distinction. But as she was serving, there's something very important which she did, is that she observed the principles of the African National Congress up to the letter. How can we forget this being the year of Charlotte Matlega? 150 years after Charlotte Matlega has passed on. Charlotte Matlega advised the people of this country is that when you go up as an individual, at least take one person with you so that you don't become better on your own by yourself. But Comrade Jackie did an extraordinary job. Is that when she was at the height of serving the people of this country in the Gauteng legislature, when Me June Steenkamp was in the quagmire of gender-based violence, Comrade Jacqueline Mofokeng raised her hand. She went down from the ladder and went straight into the quagmire, held her hand, and walked with her up to where she belongs. So it is the type of this dedication which this movement encourages all its cadres to show, because it's only through selflessness that will be able to transform this country. Because we must know that this country is a gift gifted by us by God, but we are holding it in trust for the future generation. So what we do today will affect what is going to happen tomorrow. So Comrade Jackie was an optimum of a volunteer of the African National Congress. You can see from all from her biography, what she did with her life. It was the life of selfless service. It was the life of volunteerism. So we encourage each and every member in this house to do the same, because it's only then that we're going to realize a better life for all, not a better life for some. For all, it's only through selfless service. But what I want to say is that with this humble contribution from the members of the opposition, is that it is high time that we hold hands together and fight this disease, this virus which is known as COVID-19. This virus which made our comrade to succumb, in which it can succumb to. So what is very critical here is that as we go into the constituency next week, let's ensure that each and every member of our constituency wears the mask. He or she must cover up. There must be social distancing. There must always be washing of hands and hand sanitizing, because it is only then that we are going to fight this demon. But I say to all the cadres of the African National Congress, we have overcome colonialism and apartheid. We cannot afford to be defeated by COVID-19. We say that as the rollout of vaccine is being spread throughout the country, let's encourage our people to go and vaccinate the people who qualify. We know very well now that the people are 60 years and plus, they are qualifying for that. Let's encourage our family members, our friends, our neighbors, our communities that they must go and register and get the vaccine. Because it's only then that we're going to defeat this demon. You must remember what happened. When we were growing up, we had this thing known as Kiente. You'll never go to school without the health card, because those NTA was used to ensure that you don't spread anything or are not vulnerable to any diseases. So COVID-19 only came into being in 2019, where a lot of us were old. So there was no vaccine for us during that time. So the only time it is there, it is now. Let us act responsibly and try by all our means that we ensure that we protect our communities, we protect our friends, we protect our family. On behalf of the African National Congress, I'll say, because Ms J M Mofokeng was a Christian through and through, I'll say to you, Mangwane, Jesus Christ once said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to my Father except through me. So that's what he believed in. So please hold on to that, because we know that if she died believing in that, we know that in the afterlife we are going to see her. We are going to meet with her and celebrate that we've overcome the adversities of this world. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
That concludes the speakers list on this matter. I take it there is no objection to the motion being adopted. Will members please rise to observe a moment of silence in memory of Ms J M Mofokeng. On behalf of the presiding officers, we associate ourselves with the motion. The condolences of the House will be conveyed to the Mafokeng family. The Secretary will read the last order of the day.
Debate on Africa Day, the year for arts, culture, and heritage, building a better Africa and a better world in the midst of COVID-19.
I don't have the list. The speaker is the Honorable, the Minister of Social Development, Honorable Zulu.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Respectfully, I would also like to pay my respects to the family, Yaga Comrade Jackie Mofokeng, the late. Okubuhlungu kakhulu ukuthi asikhaleli uComrade Jackie yedwa. Sikhalela nengane yakhe eyahamba naye same time. Bayasho ke abazi kangcono njengoba nje bengilalela umfundisi omkhulu. Bengazi ukuthi umfundisi ongaka. Uma bekhuluma bethi God gives at his time and God takes at his own pace too. Thank you very much, family, for having taken care of Comrade Jackie. I am one of those people who worked with Comrade Jackie for a number of years. I am one of those comrades who will recall meeting her right here in this house and having very strong conversations, especially about the issues of gender-based violence. I'm hoping that yourselves, ni umndeni, together with the younger generation that is coming through, you will take responsibility and continue the work that Comrade Jackie did. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Firstly, I would like to thank the African National Congress, the organization that made it possible for me to be able to stand here, to give me this opportunity to open the discussion and the debate on a very important day, that is Africa Day. More important is for us to remind ourselves that we also are African. Many a times you find people talking about Africa, whenever they are going somewhere within the continent, they say they are going to Africa, when they are in Africa themselves. Honorable members, fellow Africans across the length and breadth of our beautiful continent, but of course, fellow South Africans, Jambo, Entlema, Akam, Sanu, Selam, Asalam Akim, Maskati, Mbote, Apsheni, Dumelang, Sanbonani. As I was reflecting and preparing for this occasion to speak today, I could not help but be reminded of some of the headlines that we often see, Deputy Speaker, particularly headlines that we see in some other continents about the African continent. We see headlines and frontline pages that scream Africa's agony and Africa's woes, poverty-stricken Africa, debt and Africa's resource curse. But as I was going through the different headlines, I was reminded also of another headline that had me asking myself at one point, and that headline, I think if I'm not mistaken, was the Times or something. It says, Africa is the next best thing. And the question that I asked myself, and I remember that I spoke about this many a times when I was a Minister of Small Business Development, talking to young people in particular, I would say to them, here is a headline that seems to be moving from headlines of darkness, but moving into headlines of positivity. And I used to ask the young people, when you read that headline that says, Africa is the next best thing, do you ask yourself the question, it's the next best thing for who? Do you see yourself? You see, yazi ukuba uwe yazi sometimes ungcono uthule nje once ngoba ukhuluma into ongayazi nje awuyeke iCuba futhi uwe uyamsho uwe lo obhala le headline engikhuluma ngayo akawuthule for a change hlukana nami man. As I continue to reflect, especially to the young people, and by the way, when we talk about young people, we don't talk about ourselves only, we talk about all colors of people of South Africa. We talk about young Black, young white, young colored, young Indian. It's a pity we are still reflecting in that way, but that is just the reality of our situation. So mangibona ngimela, angizikhulumeli mina ngingedwa, ngikhulumela wonke umuntu wase South Africa. Le Freedom Charter ethi South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. So, laba bayibhala leyo Freedom Charter, by the way, babengahlanyi emakhanda wabo. Babazi kahle ukuthi even if South Africa singayikhulula, wonke umuntu ohlala eSouth Africa, whether black and white, belongs to this country. So ngicela ukuthi ungiyeke ke ngithi ukukhuluma nje, ungizwe ukuthi ngithini. The time has arrived for Africans to determine the narrative that will drive the collections and untapped potential of Africa's youth. It is on this basis that we need to drive a strong people-to-people relation focus, invest in Africa's youth, and enhance our socially and economically beneficial intra-Africa networks. In order for us to realize this, we need to conduct self-critical and deep introspection. Where did we go wrong if we went wrong? What wrong are we doing that should be corrected at once? What intra-trans-Africa strengthening should we reinforce in order to start directing our outcomes as they unfold? Africa's unity at the founding of the Organization of African Unity on the 25th of May, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, was made possible by our common struggle and fight against colonialism and oppression. We duly rose into liberation and achieved political freedom. As we are intensifying our realization of Africa's economic freedom, we must recall that this was at the heart of the transition of the OAU to the African unity, which we have today. And the key vehicle through which this is being carried out is the AU Agenda 2063 that we adopted in January 2015 under the able stewardship and leadership of Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who is our Minister of Cooperative Governance. I wish to honor the legacy of visionary leadership of the African continent, both men and women, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Julius Nyerere, Queen Asewatawa of Ghana, Harriet Tubman, among others, and I draw inspiration from the words of the then Emperor of Ethiopia, His Majesty Haile Selassie I, and I quote, "Africa is today at the mid-course in transition from the Africa of yesterday to Africa of tomorrow." Even as we stand here, the task of which we have embarked, the making of Africa, will not wait. Throughout our history, and whenever we intentionally united around the challenges, we have invariably succeeded. A few among these such instances include the project to decolonize Africa, the establishment of institutions of collective governance and work in progress, developing our innovation, technological and economic capacity towards strengthening intra-Africa. A few days ago, His Excellency President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo of the Republic of Ghana was addressing the official opening of the Pan-African Parliament. He reminded us that as people, like any other people elsewhere in the world, we find our common and overarching identity in Africa's arts, culture, customs, and heritage. Our history, geography, and economies only add to preeminent character of who we are. Now, unfortunately for us, coronavirus has attacked us and has forcefully reminded us that the need to address the intra-Africa inequalities. Likewise, the vast majority of areas where we fall short of acting together, where the identities, aspirations, and interests of colonizers and neo-colonizers are concerning. In the same manner that we did not welcome the old imperialists and colonizers, we are cautioning aspiring colonizers to stay where they are and not come into our soil if they are not prepared to work with us. I thank you.
Thank you. In future, honorable members, do indicate to us to let you know if you are left with 2 minutes or a minute. You can say that in advance so that we help you and we don't fight. There's no need for us to fight. We haven't done so yet today. Honorable Gwahu.
you, Deputy Speaker.
So you are fine.
Yes, I
Okay.
won't fight with you, don't worry.
It's okay.
Deputy Speaker, as the continent celebrated Africa Day yesterday, marking the founding of the African Union designed to challenge colonialism and apartheid, it is critical to reflect on how far we have come as these various countries. The COVID-19 pandemic over the past 14 months has illuminated a number of challenges that Africa continues to face, and crucial among them is being a crisis of leadership. There's a direct correlation between the quality of leadership of the continent and how well it does in bettering the lives of its people. Many countries across the continent are marred by conflict, shackled by unethical leaders who don't know when to leave office and simply fail to govern well for those who elected them. For a young continent whose average age is just above 19 years, the oldest head of state in Africa is 87 years old. While age alone is not a determinant of excellence, this shows a complete disconnect of leaders from the people that they lead. And it shows. South Africa has certainly not been spared from the curse of big man politics. We too suffer from the pandemic of unethical leaders, unaccountable to the people that elected them to serve them, and clearly adverse to excellence in governance. You just have to look at the revelations coming out of the Zondo Commission to see the extent of our crisis of leadership. Just yesterday, we learned of Zizi Kodwa's love for the finer things in life at the expense of ordinary South Africans. Minister Mkhize, the very person leading this country's COVID-19 response, has been embroiled
Yes,
in a
member.
Rule 82 is very clear that you cannot call each other in first name terms, please. You cannot call each other in first name terms. You just
Yes,
call the member of this
yes,
house.
that's correct.
It cannot be right.
Yes.
Honorable Gwahube, it's a practice you know very well.
Absolutely, Deputy Speaker. Just yesterday, we learned of Honorable Zizi Kodwa's love for the finer things in life at the expense of ordinary South Africans. Minister Mkhize, the very person leading the country's COVID-19 response, has been embroiled in a multi-million rand irregular contract awarded to his friends. The AG has flagged digital vibes for being riddled with many irregularities.
Honorable Farouk has just cast aspersions on the character of Honorable Mkhize. Please, according to Rule 85, it's a serious problem. Thank you.
Honorable members, please stop screaming. Hold on. Honorable Gwahube.
Yes, sir.
We have in the past said, even if you draw it in a quotation set elsewhere, including in the courts, in the House, you need to do it by way of a substantive motion. And when you don't do it in that way, then it violates the rules as accepted in the House.
However, Deputy Speaker, I just do want to draw your attention that embroiled does not necessarily mean that
But
it has
Honorable
been confirmed.
Gwahube, casting aspersions, insinuating is just as much as having said it explicitly.
That's right. I will simply say it has been reported that the minister is embroiled in a multi-million rand irregular contract awarded to his friends. The Auditor General has flagged digital vibes for being riddled with many irregularities, including the possible conflict of interest. This is why the Democratic Alliance will be calling on the president to remove the minister from his post. There can be no holy cows where accountability is concerned. The minister cannot be both a player and a referee in an investigation that concerns him. Law enforcement agencies must do their work without any undue influence. 150 million rand, honorable members, could have been spent investing in a health system that has been on its knees for the past 14 months. But instead, it has lined the pockets of greedy politicians and their friends. Corruption that steals public money that is meant to save the lives of ordinary South Africans is criminal, it is abhorrent, and quite frankly, it's a pandemic itself. All of this is happening while South Africa is staring at a possible third wave of COVID-19 infection, while only a fraction of the population has been vaccinated. At the race that we are going, we will not be able to reach immunity, population immunity anytime soon.
Order, honorable members, you can't be screaming. not order, it's not orderly.
Will you protect
Go ahead,
the
go ahead, honorable member. Sorry?
Will you protect from
You,
okay.
but you're doing what I'm doing. What? No, don't waste your time, honorable member, please. And I notice you're watching, you're looking at your watch correctly. Stay with your watch and you say, honorable members, please stop screaming.
And so while we should celebrate the unity of the African continent and all that is great about its people, let us not navel gaze and lose sight of the task at hand. The people of this continent have endured wars, racial segregation, and at times grinding poverty in the country of their birth. And now they are victims of poor, unethical leadership, failed economic policies, and a global pandemic that has come to decimate the little that is left of this continent and the little that is left of their own patients. I would urge us all to do better, but I know that the members of this House have no interest in being part of the solution. They are quick to call themselves honorable members, but do very little, which is honorable.
Your time has expired. Honorable Lingonji.
Deputy Speaker, the economic freedom fighters joined millions of Africans in the continent and in the diaspora in marking the 58th anniversary of the formation of the Organization of African Unity, which is continentally and globally celebrated as Africa Day. The 25th of May, 1963 marks a very important day in the history of this continent. And under the ideological guidance and leadership of the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Sékou Touré, Haile Selassie, Leopold Senghor, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and many others, Africa took the first steps towards unifying the continent. On that occasion, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had this to say, quote, "The unity of our continent, no less than our separate independence, will be delayed if indeed we do not lose it by hobnobbing with colonialism. African unity is, above all, a political kingdom which can only be gained by political means. The social and economic development of Africa will come only within the political kingdom, not the other way around," unquote. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said this because he fully understood that, quote, "Neocolonialism is based upon the principle of breaking up former large united colonial territories into a number of small, non-viable states which are incapable of independent development and must rely upon the former imperial power for defense and even internal security. Their economic and financial systems are linked as in colonial days with those of the former colonial ruler," unquote. The Emperor Selassie further emphasized this point and said, quote, "Today, we look to the future calmly, confidently, and courageously. We look to the vision of an Africa not merely free, but united. In facing this new challenge, we can take comfort and encouragement from the lessons of the past. We know that there are differences among us. Africans enjoy different cultures, distinctive values, special attributes. But we also know that unity can be and has been attained among men of the most disparate origins, that differences of race, of religion, of culture, of tradition are not inseparable obstacle to the coming together of peoples. History teaches us that unity is strength and cautions us to submerge and overcome our differences in the quest for common goals, to strive with all of our combined strength for path to true African brotherhood and unity," unquote. We are bringing back the memories of these great leaders because Africans everywhere must always be reminded that the celebration of Africa Day is and should be the celebration of African political, economic, and social unity. We do take note that now many generations of African leaders post the 1963 core group of leaders have not progressively carried forward the vision of African unity. As a result, most African countries continue to be enclaves of their former colonizers. The neo-colonial masters continue to ruthlessly extract and exploit natural resources of this continent, particularly mineral and energy resources of Africa, without paying taxes at the expense of our people. They continue to sponsor civil conflicts and terrorism in Africa because instability of the continent gives them space to extract and steal our natural resources without consequences. It is therefore important that we reaffirm the principle contained in our founding manifesto as the economic freedom fighters that the development of South Africa is inextricably linked to the development of the continent as a whole. There is no amount of sustainable socio-economic development that will be attained in South Africa unless the state plays a prominent role in the economic development of the African continent as a whole. This must include the development of economic corridors to link up the entire continent and create capacity to produce and consume goods in the continent. Further, we reaffirm our principle that the EFF will advocate for the ultimate integration of the African continent through the erosion of and eventual elimination of unnecessary borders. To give proper respect to the vision of the founding fathers of the AOU, we call for the following action. A, strengthening of the Pan-African Parliament as the legislative oversight body for the African continent. B, establishment of the African Stand Force and joint African military action to stop the terrorism and instability in Mozambique, Mali, and all African countries affected by conflicts and terrorism. 3, isolation of Morocco from all continental bodies until they allow for the independence of the Sahrawi Republic. D, cancellation of visa requirements for all intra-African trade travel. E, reviving of the African industrialization plan, which must complement the African continental free trade area. These are important building blocks towards African political, economic, and social unity, Deputy Speaker. We cannot continue celebrating Africa Day without working towards the eventual unification of the continent. Forward to the unity of African continent, forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Honorable Slengwa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. As we celebrate Africa Day this year, commemorating the establishment of the OAU, we need to be starkly reminded of our duty to unite and to speak to the needs of the people of Africa. This duty towards unity with a strong focus towards the economic needs of the African people was best expressed in 1963 when President Kwame Nkrumah said in his address at the founding of the OAU, he beseeched us when he said, "We must unite now or perish. We must recognize that our economic independence resides in our African Union and requires the same concentration upon the political achievement." Chairperson, these words still ring true to this very day, 58 years later since the founding of the African Union. We must use all our opportunities, not only as South Africans, but as Africans, to commit ourselves over the next few decades, well into the future, to the struggle of economically liberating all our people. Many of us need to be reminded of the bravery and selfless sacrifice of our former liberation heroes, the true revolutionaries who, despite the evil atrocities committed against them and the ruthless exploitation of our African people, our countries and our natural resources had to put their lives on the front line for us in pursuit of freedom, justice, and liberation. As we commemorate this day and the sacrifice of those who came before us for a political emancipation, we have no other choice but to heed the call for economic liberation and economic justice. This year, Africa Day is celebrated under the theme of honoring the arts, culture, and the heritage of African people. Deputy Speaker, under this theme, we have a duty to remember the mass dispersion of our people during the transatlantic slave trades. The millions of our African people of Western and Central Africa who were sold in different regions throughout the Americas and the Caribbean, who now make up some of the world's greatest talent, the best artists, musicians, composers, and producers. Our strength, our diversity, our resilience, and our sheer determination as a people have placed us in a position to export and showcase to the world. We now export our rich sounds, our rhythms, and our heartbeat of Africa to the world. However, there are many shortcomings of our governments, not only in its response to the efforts on the continent in the race against the spread of the deadly corona pandemic, but to the very artists and musicians and all those in the cultural and creative industries. Deputy Speaker, it pains the IFP to see how government has failed our people and failed those who are in this industry, as they have been severely impacted by the pandemic. Funding that our government held accountable in its relief initiatives to soften the blow. In these uncertain times, the power of the arts, not only to uplift and inspire people, but also to educate our people, cannot be overemphasized. Therefore, Chairperson, we must tighten our grip and acknowledge that power, greed, and corruption will destroy us. It will disable any of our to live up to the promise of equality. Let us remove these obstacles and elements from amongst us, and let us unite behind the collective ideal of economic justice and economic liberation in Africa. In these uncertain, they have, Chairperson, the role of the arts is not only vital for the social well-being of all our countries on the continent, lest we forget it is also a major and critical economic contributor. Let us do right to the arts sector as we commemorate Africa Day.
Thank you, Honorable Slengwa. Barrett Denner.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The Year for Arts, Culture and Heritage, Building a Better Africa and a Better World in the Midst of COVID-19. Let's take stock of this year, the Year for Arts, Culture and Heritage in the midst of a pandemic under the ANC government, shall we? Let's start with the arts, and the Honourable Minister Zulu referred to media headlines, so let me do the same. Protesting artists blockade Arts and Culture Department building. Protesting artists want Mtetwa's resignation over NIC's
for one another.
Chairperson, I was quoting media headlines, but I will take that into cognizance.
Now, Honourable Member, even if you are quoting media headlines, you are repeating that headline. The headlines in the media is not subject to parliamentary rules. You are subject to parliamentary rules. Continue, Honourable Member.
Thank you, House Chair. 12% of those who received the National Arts Council funding were collectively paid more than 128 million rand, which equates to 46% of the funding. The COVID-19 pandemic has literally wreaked havoc on the lives and livelihoods of South African artists, rendering many of them unable to afford to care for their families and even themselves. And yet this is what happens under the watchful eye of the ANC government, this so-called caring government. Presidential stimulus package funding, as with all other forms of funding on all levels of government, is misappropriated, stolen and defrauded away from those who need and deserve it most. Why? Because fraud and corruption are endemic in the ANC, and where government is involved, there you will find it. But Honourable House Chair, let me not pick all the low-hanging fruit. Let's look at the cultural heritage of our beautiful and diverse South Africa. One would think that the one heritage site in the country, possibly the world, that would merit the extraordinary and special care and attention of government would be the Robben Island Museum. But no, this is no exception. The DG of Sport, Arts and Culture himself noticed during a site visit in 2020 that the infrastructure on the island was falling into disrepair. Yet, the Department of Public Works failed to spend more than 100 million rand of infrastructure grant by the end of March 2020. You see, Honourable House Chair, that's the other problem with the ANC government. That which is not misappropriated is misplanned and thus unspent. Die jag wat op Afrikaner erfenis en gedenkwaardighede gemaak word, is 'n verdere bewys dat hierdie regering geen vorm van respek vir enige van Suid-Afrika se inheemse bevolkingsgroepe het nie. Die verwydering van standbeelde, reuse bedrae broodnodige fondse wat op die verandering van straat en plekname bestee word en die miskenning van die regering van die geskiedenis en lot van onder andere Afrikaners deur middel van sondebokpolitiek maak van Suid-Afrika se burgers, miljoene mense soos ek, wat gebore en getoe is in hierdie land en op hierdie kontinent, in wie se are Afrikaner en Afrika bloed vloei, vreemdelinge. I am not a stranger in this country. I am an Afrikaner, a South African, and I am an African. I am proud of my heritage and the collective heritage of this country and this continent, no matter what the ANC or EFF says to the contrary. You, the ANC, have no business claiming that you are building a better Africa and better world. Before that can be done, a better South Africa must be built first. But you have ruined this country, even before the pandemic, and anything you say to the contrary is hypocritical because the proof is in front of us every day. We see it and we see you. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Meshu. All honourable members.
Chair of Chairs, the dream of building a better Africa and a better world will remain what it is under the current leadership on the continent. Africa has leaders who lack vision for a prosperous, vibrant economies on the continent. Leaders who lack courage and moral fortitude to confront issues that continue to plague us, such as corruption, unemployment, and terrorism. Human rights abuses, increasing incidents of gender-based violence, affirm the fact that we have leaders who seem incapable of providing an environment that is safe and secure for those in their countries. The good infrastructure that was inherited has mostly been destroyed and allowed to decay because of incompetence and corruption. To give just one example, Zimbabwe used to send foreign aid to the United Kingdom, but now depends on foreign aid from Europe and other countries, and this must change. Chair of Chairs, the ACDP believes that the current crop of African leaders, with the exception of a few, have tolerated corruption in their countries. What they are good at is to go abroad with begging bowls to ask for more grants and loans at great expense. The ACDP further believes that Africa is a wealthy continent that should be able to sustain itself rather than rely on countries that do not even have minerals we have on this continent. Africa desperately needs visionary leaders who will bring positive change to the economic prospects of their countries, leaders who will move Africa from primarily being raw material producers and the producers of agricultural goods to an Africa that will know how to beneficiate the raw materials, develop and manufacture goods. Relying solely on mining and the production of raw materials will not bring prosperity to Africa. Countries that have manufacturing capabilities see an improvement in their economies and are able to create more jobs for their people. Unemployment on this continent remains unacceptably high, and we see people risking their lives going abroad because of lack of jobs and poverty. Africa needs visionary leaders who will foster growth of industries that will develop and manufacture goods, thereby creating jobs and reducing unemployment. This will make African countries more competitive and ready themselves for the export markets. Now is the time for Africa to rise to the challenge and become more competitive in the global market, and in so doing will create much needed jobs and transform their economies and the continent. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Kwankwa.
Chair, I have connectivity issues. Can you give me a few minutes, please? And maybe move to the next speaker.
Okay, we'll go to the next speaker then, who is the Honourable Zungula.
Thank you, Chair. We need to properly define African unity outside of the populist rhetoric. African unity must mean unity of purpose. There must be peace and prosperity in all corners of the continent. There must be the decolonization of the continent. Africa must divorce itself from colonial institutions and structures. Meghan Markle recently offered to save the Queen of England in a Commonwealth country like South Africa. That clearly shows we are still a British colony. South Africa must leave the Commonwealth. In Africa, we must have bold leaders who are determined on transforming their countries and ensuring their countries are self-sufficient. It is poor leadership to have African leaders being summoned to France to discuss African problems. Africans must be encouraged to deal and confront bad governance, corruption in all African countries. This is the main reason why Africans flee their countries and risk being made slaves in Libya or die whilst attempting to swim to Europe. Africans must be encouraged to correct the wrongs in their own countries. Malians did it. Malawians did it. All countries can do it. We must not have a generation of Africans who flee their own countries in times of difficulty. There must be equal treatment of Africans in Africa. There is no unity without equality. It cannot be correct that South Africans are expected to have passports to travel across the continent. They are arrested and deported if they're in a country illegally. They aren't allowed to do jobs those citizens of those countries can do. They are restricted from certain sectors of the economies in those countries. Yet when the same is spoken about in South Africa, it is labeled xenophobic. Treat Africans the same and there will be real unity. Tanzanians are Africans, Ugandans are Africans, and also South Africans are Africans. And such, they have a right to express themselves on the affairs of their own country. South Africans aren't wrong to say our immigration, labor, and trade laws must be enforced and respected. Brotherhood is all about mutual respect. South Africa has 43% unemployment rate. More than 30 million of its citizens are living in poverty. It is the rape capital of the world. 58 people are murdered each and every day. It is the most unequal country in the world. South Africa is not wrong to deal with these problems and cater for its citizens first. When you have 30 million people living in poverty, fighting over scarce resources, instead of increasing those resources, you encourage another 15 million people to come to South Africa and fight over these scarce resources. You are only inciting violence. As Africans, we need to be frank, openly discuss and debate issues raised, and not attempt to silence genuine concerns of the people as xenophobic or Afrophobic. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Kwankwa, are you connected now?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. At the time of independence, African leaders established institutions for colonial cooperation and unity and crafted various indigenous development plans, which to a large extent have yet to be implemented. As a result, Africa still has a long way to go in its development and in its vision to strengthen trade, stimulate growth, and to unite Africa, primarily because of a lack of political will and political leadership. These are issues that we feel as the United Democratic Movement are at the heart of building a peaceful, integrated, and prosperous Africa. One of the biggest challenges facing the African continent today is that of political leadership, where political leaders, the big men of Africa, refuse to relinquish power. Most of them want to die in office while inciting violence and conflict among citizens. We have an African Union where human rights violations across the continent are not being paid attention to. An African Union that turns a blind eye to human rights violations that are perpetrated by their member states. The other problem that we find with the African continent is that while it is modeled on the EU model, the challenge with the AU is that it has set no standards whatsoever for membership. All that one needs is to be a member state in Africa to qualify for membership. While there should be standards in terms of political development and political situation in the country, the human rights development situations in the country, including with levels of economic fundamentals that should be in place. These issues, in our view, would help us to integrate Africa at a much faster pace than what has happened. Silencing the guns is one of the Agenda 2063 objectives. Yet, we have seen countries like Mozambique and Ethiopia, especially, where people are either dying of hunger or because of conflict. How can we possibly achieve peaceful environment in Africa and sustainable economies when Ethiopia, the country with AU headquarters, is currently in conflict? Fellow South Africans, we need an independent AU that will provide genuine African solutions to African problems. The AU should be sustained financially by its member states, not by foreign donors, in order to ensure its independence. And in order to achieve a prosperous continent, we need a more effective AU and Pan-African Parliament that should indeed be the legislative arm for the African continent. We are also of the view as the United Democratic Movement that the time has come for Africa to establish its own central bank so that member states can be able to go to that central bank whenever they require funding for whatever projects, including projects that have to do with infrastructure development. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Jacqueline.
My fellow South Africans, no, this is not a speech delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa as we celebrate Africa Day, but it should be, because this is the message South Africa needs to hear. We are a country in crisis, and the Democratic Alliance will do anything in our power to save South Africa from collapsing into an abyss. We are committed to saving lives, livelihoods, and the economy by putting personal agendas aside and working for all the people who elected us to serve them. House Chair, COVID has not caused the healthcare or social services crises we are faced with, but it has exposed the rot and the weaknesses that are hallmarks of these vital departments. In an ideal world, healthcare and social services care for the most vulnerable citizens when they are at their most vulnerable. But in South Africa today, because of a lack of political will, they do not. Society is screaming for help. Doctors and nurses are broken. Orphaned children, the elderly, and the destitute are desperate for relief. And this can be achieved by a caring DA-run government who puts its citizens first. We have been crippled by a pandemic our doctors and nurses cannot control, but also by an ANC government that had the capacity to double staff complements, but didn't. Just yesterday, one of the largest ICUs in the Eastern Cape was buckling under its caseload, and there were just 2 doctors on call. Only 3,465 out of 9,000 unemployed social work graduates found employment during this pandemic. The rest watched helplessly from the sidelines as one by one, their overburdened colleagues struggled to plug the gaping holes and prevent further human casualties from falling through the cracks. We currently sit with a conservative 330,000 qualified nurse vacancies in hospitals across South Africa. This has contributed dramatically to the number of COVID deaths in this country. Yet, hundreds, if not thousands, of newly qualified South African doctors and nurses sit idly at home, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for departments of health letters of appointment while they watch the statistics of COVID deaths spiral out of control. They want to work. They are desperate to work, but there are no opportunities or posts or money to pay for them. So we've been told. And yet, we offered employment to Cuban doctors, costing the Department of Health a total of 239,181,933 rand just in salaries. We are not talking about COVID deaths from COVID for ordinary citizens, but also for medical professionals who have succumbed to this pandemic because of corruption, inferior PPE, a lack of human capacity and life-saving equipment, and an uncaring system that is hopelessly under-resourced. Demoralized and burnt out, these dedicated professionals turn up for work every single day, searching for real hope, searching for real change that will restore their faith in their professions and in their government. My fellow South
Honourable
Africans,
Member, your time
this
is now
is the
expired.
reality. Happy Africa Day.
The next speaker is Honourable Mamabolo. Honorable Mamabolo.
Ke a leboga modulasetulo Pro League. Ke thome ka go tšea sebaka se ke leboge mokgatlo wa ka wa National Congress ka sebaka se ba re fileng sona. Modulasetulo Pro League maabane e be re dutse kua di-shopong lifestyle re ja malamogodu ebile re tšhetse babalas acha re ja dijo tša se-Africa re keteka Africa Day. Lo tšhela babalas acha dijo tšela ja ba bose kudu ka gobane ke dijo tše re bana ba borena sa tšo ba rutiwe tšona ba se ka nyaka fela mahenya ge ba le meketeng ga mmogo le meletlong. Ke ka fao go bohlokwa modulasetulo go ruta bana ba rena gore ba theeletše diši tša radio tša SABC kudu-kudu Bothobela FM Mongano Lonene Phalaphala FM.
Honorable Mamabolo,
ga mmogo le Umhlobo
will you just take your seat, please? Honorable members, there are no translation on the translation services coming through. Take your seat, Honorable Mamabolo. We'll continue now when we get the translation services restored.
Honorable
Mamabolo, you may just take your seat for a while. Order, honorable members. Honorable Mamabolo, you may continue. Our apologies for stopping you in your speech.
Yeah, o swana go lena sepedi le dipolelo tše dingwe gape tša mo Afrika ra bona bontate fiber a bolela ka Afrikaans ke ya motheletša o tseba botse mo komiting ya rena ya dipapadi bogabo le setso. Honorable Chair, on this Africa Day debate, we wish to draw your attention to the African arts, culture and heritage to communicate the message of Africa's past and its future. Within the context of African Renaissance, the rebirth of our continent. Honorable Chairperson, somewhere in 1906, one of the founders of the ANC, Dr. Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, dared the world not to compare Africa to Europe or any other continent. This, as he said, was in fear from such comparisons. Rather, the fact that common standard is impossible to find. Of significance to our debate today, Honorable Chairperson, is that President Seme said that African civilization, which is incomparable to any in the world. Dr. Seme said, and I quote, "Come with me to the ancient capital of Egypt, Thebes, the city one of hundreds gate, the grandeur of its vulnerable ruins and the gigantic proportions of its architecture, reduced to significance and the boasted monuments of other nations. The pyramids of Egypt are structures to which the world presents nothing comparable. The mighty monuments seem to look with disdain on every other work of human art and to die with nature herself. All glory to Egypt belongs to Africa and her people," unquote. But Honorable Chairperson, it will be wrong of me to speak about Egypt and their pyramids, whereas we can't condemn the barbaric behavior of Mamelodi Sundowns fans. The barbaric acts that happened at Lucas Muripe Stadium on Saturday, that was uncalled for, Masanda one. I'm your fan, you know very well, but I disown that kind of behavior. And we are calling upon the president of CAF, President Motsepe, to act, because Fiso is our brother and the Egyptian players are also our brothers. Bafana played in the 2019 World Cup there. We defeated Egypt in a packed stadium, Cairo Stadium, 1-0. Did the Egyptian fans attack us? The answer is no. Masandawana will have to win some and lose some. Here in South Africa, we have been mooring Kaizer Chiefs and Rwanda Pirates left, right, and center. We have been conquering Africa.
Point of order.
Honourable Member, there's a point of order. Yes, Honourable Paulson.
Chairperson, I'd just like to know, is it parliamentary to use the word mooring in a sitting?
Thank you, Honourable Paulson.
Leave this, he is a
Thank-
clown. Leave.
Honourable Mhlangwini, I didn't ask for your comment. Your member raised the point of order and I'm dealing with it. Honourable Mamabola, you must withdraw that word. I don't want to repeat it.
I was Rob Mooring, Chairperson. We've been defeating Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates in this country. Chiefs reveta Rishima Zoga Marao, but from Orijamal Wagon offside Masanda one. Pirates on Nabila Ribbon Revet and upwards. But what I'm saying, Masanda Wanagore, we are Africans, we must respect each other. We must let people go and represent us well in Africa. Honorable Chairperson, almost 92 years after the speech of President Semi, the then President, former President Mbeki of the Republic of South Africa, and later the President, delivered an address at the United Nations University on the subject of the African Renaissance. And President Mbeki said, I quote, the architectural monuments represented by the giant sculptured stones of Aksum in Ethiopia, the Egyptian pyramids, the Tunisian city of Carthage, and the Zimbabwean ruins, as well as the legacy of the ancient universities of Alexandria of Egypt, the Fez of Morocco, and once more the Timbuktu of Mali. President Mbeki said, when I survey all this, much more besides, I find nothing to sustain the long-held dogma of African expressionism, according to which the color black becomes a symbol of fear, evil, and death, unquote. Both President Seme and Mbeki communicated an unequivocal message for all to know that Africa boasts of gigantic proportions of architecture, which may reduce to insignificance hosted monuments of other nations, and that the color black does not symbolize fear, evil, and death. Today we celebrate Africa Day. The question which we must all ask is, how do we build this vast contribution of Africa to world civilization to advance the rebirth of our continent? The response to this question is that we go back to the 1976 charter where the African heads of states and governments gathered in Port Louis in Mauritius to adopt the cultural charter of Africa. This charter was further affirmed by the 6th ordinary session of the African Union in Khartoum. The object of the charter includes the assertion of the dignity of the African men and women, as well as the popular foundations of their culture. It also encourages the promotion of freedom of expression and cultural democracy, which is inseparable from social political democracy. And lastly, to preserve and promote African culture, heritage through preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation. When we are called upon by history as children of Africa to claim our space under the sun, not as a charity case, but as a continent whose time has arrived, a continent where a human thought began, a continent where philosophy began. We are a continent that contributed to the knowledge in mathematics, science, medicine, and philosophy in the world. As we mark Africa Day, Honorable Chairperson, we should do so with the knowledge that we are equal citizens of the world. Let's celebrate our culture, our heritage, and arts. Hiada muhori lega ntakanchaka alapeni swina dia nompofu. Zula sitilo ridzulela udipina ngazwilila zwati alala zwaudipelela vengeleli la vuma susumeni dorobeni atoyando rolwa ngamanda mjula sitilo nda.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable August.
Honourable Chairperson, on Africa Day, we reflect on the continent's progress in forging unity, peace, independence, and better lives from the trenches of slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and oppression. But how can we talk unity when thousands of refugees are fleeing Morocco for better opportunities in Spain? And while nations bicker over the use of life-giving water from the mighty Nile River? How can we talk peace when we are plagued with coups in Mali, resulting from inability to transfer power democratically? While the conflict in South Sudan has displaced more than 4 million people. What independence do we speak of when our continent's economic agenda is set by powerful institutions and nations thousands of miles from our shores? How do the millions of Africans still live in poverty and seeking better lives and livelihoods? For how long, in discussions about global inequality, will Africans continue to occupy the very lowest rungs? The massive challenges we face must not give the impression that Africans don't have agency, that we somehow survive by the grace of richer and more powerful players. We haven't survived by their grace. We have survived in spite of them. We have our own gifts and strengths, among them resilience and diversity. It is said that Africa's riches are the minerals underground. While the continent is indeed blessed with an abundance of precious metals and stones, there are arguably much greater riches in our people's cultures. It's about seeing values differently. Chair, arguably the very last thing the mother continent needed was COVID. It is exerting massive pressure on African economies and exposing massively under-resourced public health systems. The rollout of vaccines to richer nations first cruelly maintains the cycle of global economic apartheid and inequality. The global north, already leading the race by many miles, will return to full economic activity before the south and further extend their advantage. It sends a stark message to Africa. If we don't act together, we will be unlikely to ever be able to challenge inequality. Without looking out for each other, we'll battle to ever achieve economic sustainability and will therefore battle to take charge of our destiny. That is Good's message on Africa Day. We can fix things, but we must acknowledge our dependence on our sisters and brothers up and down the continent if we are able to create something new. We must change words associated with Africa like poverty, corruption, and wild animals to words reflecting cultural richness, wisdom, and natural resources that benefit the people's sustainability and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, allow me to express my disappointment. Speaker came onto this podium and talking about Africa, talking about South Africa, talking about many other countries. No one, and I repeat, no one remembered the Khoi and the San, who in terms of what scientists report, their DNA is the first of human life anywhere in the world, and very first in Africa in any event. The Khoi and San, Chairperson, there is no doubt, are the first people in South Africa. Then came black and white and Indian, everybody followed. But what is important is that everybody that came here found the Khoi and San here. So who are the rightful heirs of the land of South Africa? It has to be the Khoi and San. But yet, Chairperson, 27 years later, 90% of the Khoi and San still remain landless. Chairperson, the Khoi and San were oppressed by the Dutch, oppressed by the British, oppressed by our colonial apartheid regime, even went on to fight the Portuguese so that today we in South Africa could be free. The Khoi and San were labeled by the apartheid regime as if they were animals referred to as colored. The South African Human Rights Commission in 2019 recommended and made many recommendations, and gave 12 months for its implementation. Even that has not happened. The apartheid regime attempted to wipe out the history books of Khoi and San. Even that they failed. The South Africa adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People to protect their rights, full participation, and prohibit discrimination. 27 years later, Chairperson, the Khoi and San are still the poorest. They are still landless. They are still homeless. They don't even enjoy any recognition income. Let us not forget the suffering of and oppression that the Khoi and San endured. Let us not forget the role of the Cape Corps in World War II. Chairperson, let me reiterate, we have a progressive democratic constitution. What is its value if we cannot implement and give the Khoi and San back their dignity, their respect, their equality, and most importantly, Chairperson, their First Nation status? Let us return to the Khoi and San what is rightfully theirs, and that is the land, and let us uplift every Khoi and San in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Chaisa.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. In the midst of COVID-19, we can still celebrate what we have as Africans. Arts, culture, and heritage are the embodiment of Africa. We should be proud of what we have because they explain who we are and where do we go from here. These may easily connect to the whole world so as to have a better world too. Chairperson, we should never forget our languages. As Africans, we cannot have a situation where Africans will speak German, French, Portuguese and languages with ease, but coming to their own languages, they do it with difficult. That is not good at all. We should completely do away with any form of colonialism, as it was happening during the scramble for Africa. Most countries that stick to their cultures and values, arts, and heritage have improved and developed their economies. The idea that was initiated by the former President Thabo Mbeki, that is African Renaissance, was a very good one. Chairperson, we should do away with xenophobia, chauvinism, dictatorship, military coups, because this will never take Africa forward. It is when we stand together that we shall achieve the objectives of AOU, referred to as AU, or the African Renaissance and all this. Let us restore Africanism to African, and this will lead to better world. Shepherds in our music, the praise singers, indigenous knowledge will encourage the spirit of togetherness. Let us work together for the sake of our continent, Africa, even during this difficult time of COVID-19 pandemic. Africa needs to be developed economically and otherwise. Of course, Chairperson, we shall need land to practice all this. It would be easy, therefore, to overcome these challenges. The challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality can also be overcome if we're together as Africans. Chairperson, humanism together with socialism must be part of Africa. Africa for Africans. Power to the Africans. Chairperson, the matter of Muammar Gaddafi could have been avoided if we were together or united as Africans. And we're very concerned, very much concerned and skeptical of this ICC, that is International Criminal Court, that is always for Africans. The leaders that are killing people that are not Africans are always made to appear before this court. An example of George Bush, who killed a lot of people, was never summoned to appear this court. We say Africa for Africa, power to the people, power to the Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Madisha.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and members. Art and culture were used as critical weapons by millions of Africans from Cape to Cairo, as Africans waged war against that horrendous system of colonialism, which had literally usurped the realm of proper physical and mental existence of the African people. Pope thanks artists and many other cultural activists for the role they played in freeing the entire continent from that evil system. But although it took decades, and in other instances, centuries, for Africans to finally emerge and celebrate true victory, it, however, is extremely unfortunate that what African South Africans won and still have today is a pseudo-democratic victory against colonialism of a special type. Arts and culture activists who even today would still have reason to take South Africa to a better tomorrow are themselves daily destroyed by the pseudo-democratic state that South Africa has become today. Although we agree that COVID, unfortunate realities, made it hard for the artists and cultural activists to display their prowess in many big halls and stadia, full of people so that they can put food on their families' tables. It has become continuously said because the pseudo-democratic state has adopted a satanic role, which is daily putting artists into the grave. Proof is when, for instance, artists got locked up in a sit-in for more than 2 months because although government claims to have put money aside for the artists and cultural workers who have lost their jobs, those millions disappeared. More millions to address COVID have disappeared. For South Africa, and the world to enjoy a better future in the midst of COVID-19, I call on all South Africans to agree with George Orwell, as I 100% do, when he says, people who vote for political thieves are not victims, but accomplices. Do you agree to be an accomplice, you South African? I say that this is a major problem and we need to rise and deal with this because some amongst us will say, we are revolutionaries. And when we tell them, they will say, you are a counter-revolutionary. And when you say, can you even spell that, write that on a piece of paper? They can't even do that because they themselves are thieves who deny people food, and that is a major problem. The stealing of the monies in South Africa has got to be looked into. And George Orwell is therefore correct when he says that people who vote for political thieves are not victims, but accomplices themselves. South Africans,
Honourable
where
Member,
are you?
your time is
Thank you
now
very much.
expired. The next speaker is the Honourable Swartz.
House Chair, honorable members, remember the words of Inkutula Madikwane when he said, and I quote, Africa my beginning, Africa my ending, words that touch lives, words that create hope, where Africa seems dark. COVID is not our beginning, COVID is not our ending, and COVID is not our story. Allow me to tell our African story. The Charter for African Cultural Renaissance, adopted by the 6th AU Assembly held in Khartoum, Sudan in January 2006, entered into force in October 2020 upon receipt by the AU Commission of the required 15th instrument of rectification of this important policy instrument. South Africa has also rectified the Charter. This year's theme presents a unique opportunity for the continent to celebrate its great Pan-Africanists who have played and are still playing a key role in African Renaissance and its rebirth. The main focus areas of the Charter for the African Cultural Renaissance are promotion of African unity, shared values, the spirit of Pan-Africanism, and African Renaissance development of the creative economy of the continent, protection and conservation of African World Heritage Sites, and increasing of African sites in the World Heritage List, development and continued dissemination of regional and continental programs for the promotion of African identity, shared values, cultural and creative industries and heritage. I will now turn to the African response to COVID-19 through economic development. In a time of social distancing and government-enforced lockdowns to curtail the spread of COVID-19, digital technology has become the only enabler for continuation of work, education, and communication. But for millions of people who are unable to connect to the internet, the offline world is economically and socially isolating. COVID-19 has emphasized the digital divide, a term referring to the uneven access to distribution of information and communication technologies in societies, which is a global problem. However, it is even more pronounced on our continent. Our country has handed over the chairship of the AU after a hectic year that saw President Cyril Ramaphosa having had to dedicate much of his time ensuring that our African countries through the AU are able to respond to the pandemic. This included establishing key platforms to access PPEs, vaccines, and other medical facilities
required for an effective continental response. President Ramaphosa worked with the UN Secretary General to call for debt relief for African and other developing countries to allow all our economies of the developing world to recover quicker. While the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the need for greater international cooperation to address global challenges, especially for developing countries, its economic and social impact has constrained the ability of many governments to make greater financial commitments to issues such as peacekeeping, given that domestic recovery plans take priority. This could impact future funding for peacekeeping on the continent and also on support for the AU's and United Nations goals, such as Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, respectively. House Chair, South Africa should continue to contribute to regional and continental integration and the development and diversification of South Africa's internal markets through accessing foreign direct investment and expanding trade relations. The 13th extraordinary session of the Assembly of AU Heads of State and Government, which was held virtually on the 5th of December 2020, decided that the continent would commence preferential trading under the African Continental Trade Area, AfCTA, on the 1st of January 2021. The AfCTA is expected to boost intra-Africa trade, which is currently stands at approximately 16%, with Africa's share of world trade estimated only to be at 3%. In addition, the AfCTA presents Africa with an opportunity to expand its export base to be less reliant on exports of primary commodities, which are highly volatile, dependent on the growth trends in global markets. Honorable members, according to the World Economic Forum, Africa, South Africa and the continent should, among others, focus on greater cooperation and human capital development. Greater African economic integration is of paramount importance to promote peace and stability while addressing trade obstacles, climate change, corruption, cybersecurity, and the opportunities and challenges of the 4IR. This sentiment is echoed by the African Development Bank that points out that an economic borderless Africa would lay the foundation for a viable continental market to accelerate growth and allow Africa to be more competitive in global trade and value chains. It would also allow industries to develop across borders, creating economies of scale for investors as they look at wider integrated markets. The AfCTA is the world's largest single market of over 1.2 billion consumers with a combined GDP of more than $3.4 trillion and is supposed to stimulate intra-Africa trade and investment. The importance of the implementation of the AfCFTA for the prosperity of South Africa, the region, and the continent can therefore not be overemphasized. It came handy at a time when the world was befallen by the COVID-19 pandemic. South Africa's assumption of the chairship was a baptism of fire, as the first case of the coronavirus outbreak was reported on the continent in the same month. A virtual conference of the AU Bureau under the leadership and chairship of South Africa was held to look at ways and means to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 while gauging the needed support to the existing mechanisms of the Union to fight pandemics like this. It is against this backdrop that the chair of the AU South Africa pledged $6 million to the AUFS, which are disaggregated as follows: $4 million to the Special Fund for COVID-19 and $2 million towards the Africa Center for Disease Control. Malunga lahloniphekile alendlu kunesidingo lesibalulekile impela lokuthi iNingizimu Afrika iqhubeke nalokuthi ubophelela kulomsebenzi wokuvikela lokubhebhetheka kwe-COVID-19 kuleli vekathi i-Afrika. Kulesikhathi lesikuso njenganyalo, bososayensi kanye nabacwaningi balelive bamdzibi munye nabososayensi kanye nabacwaningi balomhlaba kulomshikashika wakolwisana nakanye nakulomshikashika walukunqoba lolubhubhane le-COVID-19. Honorable members, in conclusion, I wish to encourage us to continue celebrating this day as it marks a very important part of our history Africa has a huge bulge, which can be celebrated in that during this pandemic, most of the needed innovations came from the young minds in Africa. This talks to the importance of ensuring we strive to give access to education to our youth, to make them more productive and become participants in growing Africa's economies. This is a lesson we have learned from Charlotte Mafokeng, that one should do all necessary to educate the youth. Let us make efforts to emulate the values exposed by those who came before us, and specifically Mama Charlotte Mafokeng, by outholding the values she exposed, will inevitably be taking over the baton she left for many of us. Let the lessons she taught us be a guiding light for us and posterity. God bless Africa. God bless South Africa.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Nyonso.
Chairperson, Africa for Africans, Africans for humanity, humanity for God. Chairperson, these simple words are loaded with a deeply rooted message of peace, unity, and social harmony that the Western world and its foreign domination agenda has since chosen to ignore. They stubbornly suppress, distort, and rub off the message of Africa from the pages of history. Chairperson, these words are a driving force behind the historic gathering of the then recently liberated countries in Africa, which were warmly hosted in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on 25 May 1963 by Haile Selassie. Ras Tafari, the Lion of Judah, Emperor Haile Selassie played a steering role to chair and successfully mediate a dichotomy of the two strands in the independence movement of African countries that came to be known as the Casablanca and Monrovia groups. They compromised among themselves and formed the OAU, Organization of African Unity, whose main agenda was to roll out the liberation of the whole continent and unify the African people. These pioneers started the journey to Africa's liberation and continental unity, independence now, tomorrow, the United States of Africa. The journey hasn't been easy. From that time up to today, divide and rule tactics were embraced in the unity of Africa. Patriots have been assassinated. Liberation movements have been marginalized. Sellouts did their dirty work in secret, but now we know them. The road to Africa liberation is much longer. It is quite important to mark Africa Liberation Day in its meaning, in letter and in spirit, than to follow a misleading Africa Day celebration. When the crucial mission of liberating Africa from neo-colonialism, racial capitalism, settler colonialism, and imperialism has not been fully accomplished. By liberation, we mean the complete eradication of exploitation and subjugation of Africa and its people by foreign powers. Liberation for us is power to control our land and all its economic and human resources, to control our destiny and to enjoy the full benefits of sovereignty of a union of African states. We are our own liberators. The PAC remembers Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane, Sekou Toure, Ben Bella, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Thomas Sankara, Robert Mugabe, and many other African patriotic heroes whose agenda was African liberation. We remember Sobukwe's words: we are pro-Africa, we breathe, we dream, we live Africa, because Africa and humanity are inseparable. I end with his words: we take our stand on the principle that Africa is one and desires to be one, and nobody has the right to balkanize our land. His village.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair of Chairs. Happy Africa Day. Behind me is a drum from Berlin. I hope at the end of my speech you will allow me to play the drum so we have something live in Parliament reflecting the theme of this debate. Leopold Senghor is well known for saying language is a cultural phenomenon par excellence, respecting all the languages of Africa. Let us celebrate all languages in Africa, including Afrikaans captured by the Dutch from the first Indonesian Malays in Cape Town, the first freedom fighters against colonialism in South Africa, the founder of Islam in South Africa, Sheikh Yusuf, got an award, Companion of Oliver Tambo in gold for this historic role. House of Chair of Chairs, we cannot have nearly 1,000 African corpses lying on ice from most countries in Africa just because they don't have documentation. Al-Jamaa went to court to release the body of a Tanzanian. This is culturally unacceptable. The African Parliament must flex its muscle in this regard, and we look forward to them doing something about it. As Africans, it is part of our culture and heritage to honor our pledges and written undertakings, especially if it has been made by those who got our freedom, like President Mandela and leader Oliver Tambo. We must be able to look our ancestors in the eye, something Honorable Mandla Mandela is passionate about. South Africans are aware of the liberation struggle and the fighting that is taking place as we speak in occupied Palestine and occupied Western Sahara. We should send military weapons and foreign aid to help these countries. America has beaten us, though the foreign aid and the weapons went to Israel and Morocco. Al-Jamaa is looking forward to the new laws on discrimination that will outlaw Zionism in South Africa. Al-Jamaa has sponsored a motion in the South African Parliament to call on Morocco to hold a referendum based on the last voters' roll France had in place on whether Western Sahara want independence or have self-rule. And if Morocco does not agree to hold a referendum, sanctions must be imposed and a freedom force must be sent to help Western Sahara. South Africa is not in crisis. That is the narrative of the official opposition, to shout out wolf and try to harm the image of South Africa and Africa because it is run by black governments. It is too ghastly to contemplate if the country is going to be run by the Democratic Alliance or a white elite. We are a smart continent with smart people, so let us undertake to reinforce our African identity by being proud of our people's long histories, rich languages, notable cultures, and like the Honorable Minister Naledi Pandor inspired us, let us proudly share these with the global community as we embrace the cyber civilization in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair of Chairs.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable Nodada.
Sihlalo malunga bekekileyo, fellow South Africans, molweni. On this Africa Day, I would like to remind us all that South Africans must not only celebrate independence and freedom, but must bear the fruit of it through quality education that will tangibly change their lives for the better. That a young girl growing up in KwaZakele, Eldorado Park, or Kukhanyayo is not denied quality education, skills, and of their race, gender, or geographical location, then we would have achieved the mission of celebrating this day. In celebrating, we must use the opportunity to discuss our everyday reality that pose threat to our independence, freedom, and mission of an open opportunity society for all, where quality education is a survival tool one can use for a prosperous life. Africa has a long way to go in redressing the legacies of colonialism and apartheid, more so our modern crisis of leadership, corruption, and poverty. It all starts with us creating a better life here at home and doing so for future generations. Since the start of the pandemic in this country last year, we've been faced with many unique challenges. Some are still seeking innovative ways to solve, while others can be adequately addressed with proper policy planning and implementation. However, the effects of inadequacies in governments are immeasurable, from increasing dropouts at schools, failure rates, to children having to learn with empty stomachs, dilapidated and vandalized school infrastructure, rising inequalities between schools and learners that have the tools of trade to operate remotely versus those who need government support and tools to stay on track. COVID has affected our education in many ways, and various factors of ill planning will hold back generations to come. Honorable Lindiwe Sizulu. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has highlighted the exclusion of learners experienced as a result of the cost of ongoing learning. The majority of learners don't have access to Wi-Fi and do not have adequate funds for data or even devices. While in many rural parts of the country, of which I come from, have no network at all. This means that the majority of learners will be left out of the current education system structure if lockdown continues as such. According to the NIMS report released this year, 58% of public schools do not have access to computers. Only 40% of learners have access to devices. According to the Public Service Commission, only 13 million learners were left out without access to adequate schooling. Honorable Swartz, this means that this seems almost unrealistic when the drastic budget cuts of basic education has been forced to endure, let alone the inability of efficiently using money to build schools already. As we speak today, there are hundreds of dilapidated schools and asbestos classrooms, over 5,000 pit toilets, over 17,000 schools don't have libraries, let alone content of innovation and entrepreneurship. Furthermore, there's a huge gap in terms of our curriculum meeting industry and job market requirements. We need to connect the curriculum that needs to the needs of industry, the job market, and enhance entrepreneurship and innovation like the Kenyan model in our African country. The department has identified 18 schools for robotics, 135 schools for entrepreneurship, and only 27 schools for utilization of ICT. However, this is a small structure. When we want to create a better life for all, we must start at home. That's why it's relevant to Africa Day. We see nothing in our curriculum that looks at specialization industries like maritime in Port St. John's, aviation in Kempton Park, minerals refinery in Kimberley, like many of you talk about minerals here, and many others that are crucial skills that we need to develop. Ultimately, the goal is to create an education system that gives the necessary skills that match the needs of the economy. Honorable Zulu, for us to be the next best thing and build a better Africa and a better world, let's remember, a country that does not invest in its youth has no future. And let's start at home so that we can bear the fruits of freedom and independence. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a bit of a challenge with the network here, but to you, Chairperson, distinguished members, honourable members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I extend my warmest greetings to all of you present. We are honoured to partake in this very important debate that seeks to push forward the African agenda. We live in uncertain, extraordinary times where humanity the world over is faced with a huge challenge of COVID-19. This is far more than a health crisis. It is affecting societies and economies at their very core. Whilst the impact of pandemic varies with
it has always been like that before
COVID, it is an undeniable fact that it will lead to increased poverty and inequality, reversing gains many countries were making in the attainment of sustainable development goals. Humankind can only extricate herself from this challenge through forging stronger international cooperation, international regimes regulating the behavior of international actors, more robust legitimate global governance, and effective multilateralism for the world to build back better, making sure that no country is left behind. Our starting point, the central tenet of our continuing struggle is and has to be to the end of the conditions that describe millions of our people, both at home, across the continent, and the diaspora as the wretched of the earth, daily burdened and crushed by the most intolerable and dehumanizing poverty. The ANC-led government is pursuing its international relations objectives, and it's informed by the Freedom Charter that states in one of its clauses, there shall be peace and friendship. And I quote that clause. South Africa shall strive to maintain world peace and the settlement of international disputes by negotiation, not war. Peace and friendship amongst all people shall be secured by upholding the equal rights, opportunities, and status of all, close quote. Internationalism is a crucial feature in the unique character of the ANC, inspired by the spirit and ideals of human solidarity and people-centered development. It is also about putting African interests at the heart of our international relations program. Our national liberation struggle was underpinned by the tenets of Pan-Africanism and international solidarity with the broader progressive humanity. The vision of African Renaissance is to promote peace and security, ending wars and conflict on the continent, instilling good economic and political governance, ensuring social cohesion, and defending progressive indigenous African cultures. The ANC correctly became part of the progressive forces of the world by taking a stand to fight against imperialism, colonialism, racism, poverty, patriarchy, et al. Our commitment to the AU Agenda 2063 as an expression of the aspiration of Africans is central to our view that the silencing of guns on the continent is as much a security matter as it is a governance and developmental imperative. Democracy, good governance, peace, and security are conditions which are so necessary for socio-economic development and the structural transformation of Africa. The quest for peace and stability in Africa constitutes one of the major challenges facing the AU. We need to give fresh impetus to our efforts of fighting terrorism, extremism, and undemocratic regimes. Whether we are talking about Sahel region or the Horn of Africa, West Africa, and across the whole of the continent, our government, working within the ambit of SADC and AU, has made tangible interventions in the quest of silencing the guns on the continent. Mediation efforts led by President Ramaphosa, the then chair of the AU, and Deputy President Mabuza, in his capacity as a special envoy to South Sudan, led to a significant breakthrough on the warring parties in that country. The president further dispatched former presidents, Motlanthe, Chisano of Mozambique, Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, to interact with the parties in conflict in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. Further, President Ramaphosa launched renewed efforts to mediate the long-standing dispute between the parties to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, namely Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. These are some of many examples of the interventions and the showing of leadership that Africa's problems are best addressed by African leaders and making sure to silence the guns in order to achieve the Africa we want as envisioned in the AU Agenda 2063. On international solidarity with Western Sahara, for instance, we are reminding all of us that this is the only remaining colony on the continent. Their inalienable right to self-determination and independence is continuously being violated by the Kingdom of Morocco. We urge African Union and progressive forces to join efforts and continue with the struggle in solidarity with the Polisario Front for the realization of their freedom without delay. It is our moral obligation to urge the international community and the United Nations in particular to assume urgently and continuously their legal and moral responsibility of granting respect to the wishes and aspirations of the Sahrawi people. On Palestine, this year marks the 73rd anniversary of the Palestinian catastrophe known as Nakba, which resulted in the dispossession of Palestinian lands and their birthright, This took place through a systematic policy of colonial expansion, ethnic cleansing, and military occupation of the most brutal kind, which as South Africans, we readily recognize from our own experience of apartheid. The events of the past 2 weeks in that part of the world reminded Palestinians, the progressive humanity, and United Nations of the evil intentions of the state of Israel, a total disregard of the international law and blatant violation of human rights. On Cuba, for almost 60 years, the economic embargo imposed by the United States on the Fraternal Republic of Cuba is an outdated policy that has achieved little but alienating many. This relic of the Cold War is not only immoral, but unilateral in character and is a flagrant violation of the international law and the principles of the UN Charter. We call upon the Biden administration to lift the unilateral coercive measure against Cuba without any conditions. On multilateral institutions, South Africa continues to advocate for the reform of the institutions of global governance and their modernization to be fit for purpose and agile to deal with contemporary global challenges. Fresh impetus should be given to the intergovernmental process in the United Nations General Assembly for the reform of the UN and more specifically, the United Nations Security Council to reflect the current global realities. South Africa continues to champion the reform of the Bretton Woods institutions within the G20, focusing on International Monetary Fund's role in maintaining international financial stability and the World Bank's role in poverty reduction. Improved representation will enable these institutions to act with greater legitimacy, authority, and therefore effectiveness in carrying out key roles. We welcome the historic election of the first woman in Africa, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as the first Director General of the World Trade Organization. We are confident that with her at the helm of WTO, agreement will be reached as we see the signs on a temporary waiver of trade-related intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. This will allow developing countries to produce and manufacture vaccines and supply these as at affordable rates. It will help to ramp up production, thus addressing the current demand, supply, and logistical challenges. Thank you for your attention, Chair. I must just touch one or two areas which came out of the discussion here. That the AU and SADC is seized with the process of the implementation of free movement of persons and the African Union itself is leading through assessing and working out possible political, social, economic, and security implications. And this is also the responsibility of all the countries on the continent. At the same time, bilateral relations are being forged on an ongoing basis. Yes, to members who have raised the issue of the creative and sporting sectors, that these have been hardest hit by COVID-19. That is why the government, particularly the department, has ensured that it avail relief funding to all of these sectors, which itself has not been enough to cover everybody because of what we know as finite budgetary resources. But those who mismanage NAC fund will be facing the full wrath of the law enforcement agencies like the SIU and forensic investigation. We have, Chair, also.
Unfortunately, your time has now expired.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, before we adjourn, I just want to make the following ruling. Honourable members, while making a member statement on Tuesday, the 11th of May, 2021, the Honourable Jaco said, and I quote, As the EFF, we warn that the minister has malicious intentions and is manipulating the process to appoint a chairperson of the National Lotteries Commission, and this can only be for nefarious reasons, close quote. The honourable member said further in a statement, and I quote, "We want to warn the minister that the seemingly corrupt intent to want to use the state process to award people who donated to CR17 while undermining the law and the rules of parliament is unwarranted. And we will be looking at him and we will be watching," close quote. The Honourable Gadebe rose on a point of order and claimed that the Honourable Jaco had said the Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition had corrupt intent. He said that such a statement can only be made through a substantive motion, and it was unparliamentary. I asked the Honourable Jaco whether she did say that the Minister had criminal intent, to which she responded, I quote, "We said that he had a nefarious intent, which we have written about, and which is why we now have a process where Parliament," close quote. I advised the House that I would look at the statement because I did hear the word corrupt in the statement. Having studied the statement made by the Honourable Jaco, I want to rule as follows. As alluded to by the Honourable Gadebe when he rose on a point of order, and as I also indicated when I undertook to look at the Honourable Jaco's statement, the phrase in question is, and I quote, "corrupt intent," close quote, as directed to the Minister. The close reading of Hansard at the point at which the Honourable Gadebe rose on a point of order reveals the word, and I quote, "corrupt intent," close quote, cannot be read in isolation as it was uttered in a phrase which is, open quote, "seemingly corrupt intent," close quote. According to the Collins Dictionary, the word seemingly is an adverb, which means that if something is seemingly the case, it is meant that it appears to be the case, even though it may not really be so. In other words, the Honourable Jaco said the Minister appeared to have corrupt intent, even though it might not actually have been the case. This remark may not necessarily be unparliamentary. However, it is worth noting the context in which the Honourable Jaco uttered the phrase. Honourable Jaco uttered the phrase in a statement littered with unparliamentary phrases such as malicious intentions and nefarious intent. In response to me, Honourable Jaco said nefarious intent described how they as the EFF characterized the minister's intent. The word nefarious, according to the Collins Dictionary, means immoral and corrupt. Couching such an unparliamentary allegation as the position of the member's political party does not make it acceptable or parliamentary. Honourable members, I would like to draw the attention of the House to Assembly Rules 84 and 85, which provide that no member may use insulting, disrespectful, unbecoming, or unparliamentary words or language, and that no member may impute improper motives to any other member or cast personal reflections upon a member's integrity or dignity or verbally abuse a member in any way. The assertion made by the Honourable Jaco that the Honourable Minister Patel had malicious intent and nefarious intent was clearly in contravention of these rules. Honourable members, I might as well take this opportunity to urge you not to make serious allegations such as this. And if you are serious about it being investigated, you should bring a substantive motion to the House. Your remarks, Honourable Jaco, contain serious allegations and cast aspersions on the character of the Minister. I rule that you withdraw your remarks that the Honourable Minister Patel had malicious intentions and nefarious intent, as such remarks are in contravention of Assembly Rules 84 and 85. I now recognize the Honourable Jaco. Honourable Member is on the platform. Can the table just check if the Honourable Member is still on the platform? Honourable Jaco. Honourable Jaco, are you on the platform?
Yes, I am.
You must withdraw the remark, Honourable Member.
I withdraw the remark.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Members, that concludes the business of the day and the House is adjourned.
Long live the chair.
Recording stopped.